Today I want to talk about how the development of the clean energy and energy efficiency technologies that we need to curb greenhouse gas emissions can spur one of the greatest economic opportunities of the 21st century, and how a growing clean energy partnership between China and the United States could help put millions of people in both of our countries to work in high-skilled, high-wage jobs. Worldwide, energy is a $6 trillion market, and the fastest growing sector is the cleaner, greener kind. And in the next few decades, we will need to rebuild, reinvent virtually every industrial activity, from power generation and transportation to manufacturing and construction, to run efficiently and economically with drastically reduced carbon output. The question, of course, is how do we get from here to this promising future, this promising energy future? The first step must be immediate and resolute action by our governments to set ambitious clean energy adoption goals, but also to invest in clean energy. And I'm proud to say that President Obama has already done more to mitigate climate change and invest in clean energy than any president in U.S. history. In just the last year, he signed a recovery bill that had some $80 billion in clean energy investments and implemented tough new efficiency standards in automobiles, appliances, and consumer electronics. Meanwhile, China has adopted the most aggressive energy efficiency program in the entire world, and China is on track to exceed many of its ambitious renewable energy goals. Both of our governments have committed to wide-ranging cooperation on clean energy. And just last year, the United States and China entered an agreement to spend $15 million on a joint research center where teams of scientists and engineers from both China and the United States will work together on energy solutions. We've also got a joint action plan on important issues like electric vehicles and energy efficiency. But this is only the beginning of what must be done, because even with these historic efforts, today, coal and other fossil fuels still provide the majority of American and Chinese energy. Just a couple weeks ago, Chinese leaders were dismayed when it was reported that in the past 6 months, China had the largest increase in human-generated greenhouse gases of any country in history. And in the first quarter of this year alone, coal and oil sales consumption in China jumped 24%, which is twice as fast as the growth of the economy in China. In response, Premier Wen Jiabao, in speaking about China's promise to improve its energy efficiency 20% over 2005 levels by the end of the decade, or end of this year, said, quote, "We can never break our pledge, stagger our resolution, or weaken our efforts, no matter how difficult it is," end quote. But to get clean energy to scale, we're going to have to mobilize and incentivize the private sector and innovation within the private sector like never before. It's important to remember that many of the technologies needed to successfully cope with climate change simply don't even exist yet. It could be next-generation biofuels. It could be modular nuclear reactors, electric cars charged by an electric smart grid, or carbon capture and storage that completely change the way the world uses energy. It could be all of these. Or it could be innovations that have not yet been imagined. And perhaps the original idea for these innovations will come from a government research lab, whether here in Hong Kong, Beijing, or the United States. But if history is any guide, the commercialization and real-world application of these technologies will be pioneered by entrepreneurs and private sector innovators like the companies that have accompanied us on this trade mission from the United States. As it stands now, these companies already possess cutting-edge technologies that can deliver immense benefits for the citizens of both the United States and China. For example, I understand that Hong Kong has been looking at offshore wind farms. Should an American company supply some of those wind farms, it would not only be good for that American company, but it would be good for the local Hong Kong partner companies and their workers who would construct and innovate alongside the American company. And it would obviously be good news for the residents of Hong Kong who would get access to clean, renewable power. Also undoubtedly good for the American workers involved. A single commercial wind turbine typically contains more than 8,000 parts, 200 tons of steel, and 13 tons of fiberglass. Someone has to design those turbines. Someone has to make and assemble the nuts and bolts, the gearboxes, and the electrical components. That can, and often is, done in America. And some of the companies with us on this trip produce in the United States some 90% of the components that they eventually export. And so when an American clean energy company finds success here in Hong Kong and on the mainland, it creates economic value throughout the supply chain here in Hong Kong, on the mainland, and in manufacturing towns all across the U.S. That's my definition of a win-win, creating jobs and economic value and quality of life for the people here in China, Hong Kong, and the United States. And that's why a preeminent goal of government policy needs to be making it easy as possible for private sector businesses to develop new clean energy solutions and bringing them to market. In today's global economy, where ideas are just as likely to be discovered in Shatin Science Park as in San Francisco, we need to do everything we can to keep markets open and allow for the free flow of capital and ideas all across our borders.